We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Monday, June 1st here in Seoul. I'm Isujin, and this is News Generation. And joining us today to represent the Gen Z is Fabio.
Yay, happy Monday!
Monday, and also we have Woonji with us
Good
today.
morning.
Good morning. And both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So we're starting off another work week, and while Mondays can already feel daunting enough, at least most of us still have a desk waiting for us at the office. Because for some employees, a new work week can also mean hearing the worst possible words, "You're fired." And these days, companies seem to be getting increasingly creative and sometimes brutally impersonal in how they deliver that news. So before we dive into this, we're going to play a quick round of Would You Rather to see which method of firing sounds worse. So, would you rather get suddenly invited to a Zoom meeting only to realize everyone in the call is being laid off, or show up to work one morning, try to scan your employee badge, and discover that it no longer works? So, Fabio, do you want to go first?
I mean, the second one sounds very harsh.
Brutal.
Both are terrible.
Yeah.
But I think the first one, at least, you feel like that sense of being in a group where a lot of people are going through the same thing.
Right, you're not alone.
The second one doesn't really give you the chance to even talk your way out of the situation, and just lacking that type of communication and being completely blinded. Also, you have to prepare yourself and even commute to work to even realize that you're being fired. I just feel like the fact that these real life examples exist is a little bit shocking and way too harsh and even rude at times.
Right, for sure. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, first of all, I hope our viewers never face this kind of instances. But, showing up to work one day only to find out your badge is not working anymore, that's very brutal, I think. At least with the Zoom meeting, you are receiving an advance notice that you are being fired, but you commute it and you tag your badge and you finally find out the door doesn't open. It's going to be so brutal. I think I would have to answer the second one is the worst, not even worse, just worst scenario that you could ever be fired. Yeah.
And they're both horrible situations because you're being blindsided. But
exactly.
You said it, Fabio said as well. It's like you don't get a chance to really say anything.
No.
You do avoid confrontation, but at what cost?
That's true. That's true. That is a good point. There's no confrontation there. So that all this highlights how much the human side of layoffs matters, even when business decision itself may be unavoidable. So we're going to talk more about this, but first, let's take a look at the screen. Finding a job has never been easy, but now for many workers around the world, keeping one may be becoming even harder. From AI-driven restructuring to a slowing global economy, layoffs are spreading across industries and fueling growing anxiety about job security. Today on News Generation, we take a closer look at the wave of mass layoffs in the United States, South Korea's current employment landscape, and what kind of efforts, both personal and societal, may be needed to navigate this new era of work. Just as we saw in the video, job insecurity is no longer a distant concern for workers. So to start this discussion off, so how serious has a layoff wave, first of all, become in the US?
Very serious. According to layoffs.fyi, which is a US layoff tracking website, over 108,000 tech workers have already been laid off this year. So many major companies have already been involved, including Cisco, LinkedIn, PayPal, Meta, and even Amazon.
Wow.
And the list keeps growing and extending beyond tech companies to even major fast food franchises, for example, and other industries as well. So at the current pace, this year's total could even surpass very easily last year's figure of around 124,000 layoffs. So many analysts see this increase as part of a broader strategy to reduce costs. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And human labor is often considered one of the most expensive sides of operating a company. So many businesses are investing heavily in technologies such as AI that can easily automate certain tasks and reduce the need for large workforces. But one of the most concerning aspects of this is how layoffs are being carried nowadays, with many arguing that it feels unfair to dedicate many years of your life to the same company only to get in exchange, getting dismissed through an email or a text text message, sometimes even a Zoom call, as we mentioned. And part of the shift may be connected to changes that began during COVID, when remote work became common and much more approachable. Communication happened always online. But that is not the case anymore. So a lot of people are very mad at the fact that this is still happening. And another notable difference is the fact that many workers being affected are white-collar employees in industries like the technology and the corporate sector. And that has sparked wider discussions about the future of work in these specific realms.
Right, so that's especially alarming because these cuts are no longer limited to struggling industries, but are increasingly affecting high-paying, white-collar jobs and tech jobs once considered very stable. And it seems like this trend is now, unfortunately, spreading far beyond the United States. So how are other countries also seeing growing job insecurity, Moon-Jun?
Yeah, in the past, due to the advancements in AI, repetitive tasks were replaced by technology, while the remaining work was supplemented by white-collared professionals. But today, however, the situation is completely different. The layoff issue also isn't a just story isolated in the United States. For instance, a global bank headquartered in the UK, Standard Chartered, has also announced layoff plans, citing that the practical application of automation, advanced data analytics, and artificial intelligence has largely eliminated the need for the back office personnel. So from the company's perspective, the rapid development of AI technology is reducing the need to employ humans when AI can perform the same work more productively than humans. They stated that they plan to lay off more than 15% of their current workforce by 2030, which is in like 4 years. Furthermore, job market instability is growing among major Irish companies as well. According to Central Statistics Office, job destructions have surged by 9.4% compared to last year. This is because we are increasingly experiencing a silent layoffs. Silent layoff refers to a situation where companies cut their workforce without making any official announcements, and in most cases, they are doing this to dodge the public criticism. Indeed, major tech and logistics companies have already carried out some silent layoffs. So I think this is definitely not a phenomenon we are seeing merely in the States, but rather on a global scale.
Just hearing the term silent layoff sounds so bleak.
And that's very scary.
Right, exactly. So to get a more in-depth perspective on this, we're going to talk to a finance professor in the US, and that conversation will take place right after the break, so don't go anywhere.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search out channel Arirang News. Click Posts and cast your vote in the poll. Make a new type of news with us.
Joining us today is Greg, a professor of finance at Stanford University's Graduate School of Business, whose research focuses on financial markets, technology, and the broader economy. So hello, Professor. Thank you so much for connecting with us today.
Yeah, glad to be here. This is super important for a lot of our students here at Stanford.
Great. So, Professor, how widespread are layoffs in the US right now?
Yeah, so I want to give you some kind of like broader context in terms of like data, and then I'm going to tell you some more like on the human side of this. So kind of broader context, the unemployment rate in the US right now is 4.3%. That's a low number. It's historically low. It's trending upwards a little bit, but it kind of looks good. If you zoom in on recent college graduates, these are the people who are kind of bearing the brunt of these layoffs that you're talking about. That unemployment number is 5.4%, which again, it's like right in line with historical averages. So sort of like nothing to particularly write home about or panic. Zooming in on tech, like there are these really shocking headline numbers, like 8,000 people laid off at Meta. The thing that you have to remember about these companies is they're really big. So if they fire 10% of their workforce, it's just a big headline number. Now that sort of aggregate number is going to be a little higher than last year, but the last few years have been pretty good for the labor market in US tech. Broader context, there's like 12 million tech workers in the US. If 8,000 of them get fired from Meta, it sounds really bad, but it's a dynamic situation, it's a dynamic market, and they're going to probably be able to find employment pretty quickly. So that's the data. It doesn't feel good if you're one of the people who's experiencing this. And so like the thing I like that really strikes me about some of these tech jobs. So for the past 10 years, a place like Stanford these big tech jobs at Google, Meta, Cisco, Apple, and so on, they're the very safe default option. Now, it's like not easy to get into Stanford, obviously, but if you do, you have the right major, you take the right classes, you join the right clubs, you do the internship, you sort of follow the steps. Everybody knows what steps you need to follow. Everybody knows about these jobs. You follow the steps, you get the job. They pay really well, they're low risk, you can stay there for a long time. It's sort of like the safe thing for the really smart kids. Now, like partly because of the firing, partly because of the lack of new hiring, which we'll talk about in a little, that very safe, dependable path that felt really good, it's harder to get into that, and it feels a little bit more precarious once you're there. So of course, people are really worried about this. And then plus, maybe the numbers we're seeing, like they're not that big yet, but Meta laying off 8,000 people could just be the tip of a much bigger change to come.
Well, it's so interesting that the unemployment rate is not necessarily concerning, and that the path that was the typical way of achieving that type of work has been slightly shifting in terms of perspective. But what is your full opinion on what's behind the recent surge in layoffs across industries in the US?
Yeah, so there's three stories people tell, and I think you guys kind of hit on them earlier. The one that everyone here in Silicon Valley that people are really talking about is AI. Okay, so the current AI technology that everyone is using and experiencing, for whatever reason, it's so good at software engineering, really more than any other task. And I don't know if that's fundamental to the technology, or it's something about the nature of software engineering, or maybe it's just these AI companies haven't taken aim at finance professors or newscasters yet, and soon they will. Regardless, the concern is that AI is going to replace software engineers soon. And the Meta layoffs are just sort of the first signs of that. And indeed, these tech executives, when they talk about why they're laying people off, they cite AI adoption for the reason that they're firing people. So it's concerning if you're a tech worker, and it's concerning if you're not a tech worker but think you might be next. Now, I think there's two other things that I think of are maybe a little more important here. One is that a lot of these big tech companies just overhired during COVID. They went on a hiring spree. They hired tons of people. They thought everything would be online. They brought in all of these remote workers. And now, several years after that, they're realizing they don't need that many employees. They're firing some, they're hiring fewer people just to get down to the right size. And this AI stuff, it's partly true, but it's also just a really good excuse. I think the other thing I would flag is maybe there's just sort of broader economic slowdowns facing the global economy, big tech in particular. There's issues around inflation, the war in Iran, and so on. And if you're a tech company, you're not doing that well, you need to lay people off. It's better to say that you're doing it because AI is going to supercharge your company than admit you're not doing well to the markets. So I think, AI is a big part of it. I think it's also partly an excuse.
Yeah, I see. Whether it's AI or overhiring or economic slowdown, still we are experiencing these kind of job insecurity. And how do you think they can be mitigated in the long-term future?
So, we face the typical business cycle of job insecurity every 5, 6, 7, 10 years. We have automatic stabilizers. We have policies that help people out when they become unemployed. Like, this is a problem that we've been dealing with for 200 years. It doesn't feel good when you're experiencing it, but it's a thing that happens. I think focusing on AI, which is really the big question here, we've had a lot of historical episodes that are like this. We've had the Industrial Revolution. We've had a whole bunch of previous information technology revolutions. There used to be rooms full of people who would do calculations by hand, and now those people don't have jobs, but they've moved on to do something else. So for all of these things, jobs that we know about may go away, and it's just very difficult to imagine the new jobs that will sort of come about as a result of some of the new technology. Like, who knew 100 years ago that people would have a job called influencer, but now they have that job. So it's hard to imagine where we'll be. The historical precedent here is the new technology arrives. Ultimately, there are still jobs, and often there are more and better jobs. But that's not to say the transition out of sort of one steady state into a new steady state can be very painful, especially for the people who are sort of just entering the workforce and going through that.
So this kind of makes me wonder, do you feel like the college students who are applying for jobs, do you think that the way that they're preparing for jobs or kind of the areas that they're going into kind of shifted recently?
So here at Stanford, I think for the past 10 years, it's been like computer science. And harder and harder, I think, and that was like the ticket that you could get this very stable job. I think, people are starting to think of what should I major in instead. And right now, I think it's really difficult for them because they don't know what that new industry is going to be. So when I this is going to date me. When I was finishing college, this was around 2008, 2009. And like at that time, what all the smart people did is they went into finance. And then there was this big financial catastrophe, the big global financial crisis. A lot of those jobs dried up. And for a while, like people didn't know like what was the thing you were going to do. And eventually it became tech. But in those like 3 to 4 years, it was pretty uncomfortable and people had to search. Now, like ultimately, it doesn't feel good, but it's a healthy thing. Like it's great to get a bunch of our smart students out of these older big tech companies and exploring new things. There are a lot of really cool industries that need smart people in them, a lot of problems to solve. And it's sort of great that instead of working on, ads at Google, you're going to figure out how to make housing more affordable or whatever industry people are going to be interested in.
Right, this is a really layered issue. So thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today, Professor.
Of course, take care.
So we just spoke with our Zoom guests about the growing wave of layoffs and how AI is reshaping workplaces around the world. But while the US has seen large-scale layoffs, South Korea appears to be facing a somewhat different challenge. So how is South Korea's job market being affected then?
Yeah, the AI job shock in South Korea is arriving pretty quietly compared to the United States. Unlike the US, Korea's strict labor laws or like manufacturing heavy economy kind of makes direct layoffs very difficult. So what South Korea is doing in major companies, they are less hiring the new employees, which kind of directly impacts to the younger generations, like MZ generation that we are facing these days. So ultimately, while US companies lay off current workers in general, South Korea is freezing entry-level jobs, leaving younger generation to bear the brunt of this impact.
Right, so it is really the young people that are the most affected these days. So what challenges then are young Koreans facing in today's job market?
Well, one of the biggest challenges that they're facing is the fact that the current job market is having a growing number of young people who are definitely not interested in becoming part of the workforce. They are simply leaving the industry. And last year, the number of people in their 20s and 30s who were not participating in the labor force reached a record high of approximately 720,000. So this figure has been rising steadily for the past few years. And what is particularly notable is that about 83% of these individuals had previously held jobs. So many young workers are leaving small and medium-sized enterprises, sometimes even temporary positions and day labor jobs, because of a few reasons. Some of them low wages, sometimes unstable employment, and sometimes the conditions are just not that good. And the limited opportunities for career growth may also be one of the problems. So as a result, South Korea is facing a social issue in which people are not simply changing jobs, but they are also stepping away from the market entirely. And many people are looking for, let's say, opportunities that feel a little bit more resourceful and have a little bit more of purpose. But that sometimes clashes with what companies expect in this very competitive market. Sometimes they need, fast results and things that are useful, tasks that can be repeated. And people are looking for, personal growth in another sense. And sometimes there's a little bit of a mismatch situation.
Right. And what's actually also concerning, quite interesting to know, is that many young people leaving the job market aren't just inexperienced workers, but they're also people who've already experienced unstable and exhausting working conditions firsthand. So, and this also raises a broader concern of what kind of jobs and working environments are being created for the next generation. And that's why we also wanted to hear directly from our viewers. So we ran a poll on the INS YouTube channel asking about what their thoughts are on job insecurity. So, and we're going to take a look at this poll. So here's what the results show. So according to our poll, the biggest trigger for job insecurity was seeing layoffs and forced resignations happen nearby, with 62% of respondents choosing that option. Another 20% said they feel the most anxious when AI is introduced into their field of work, while 13% pointed to worsening economic conditions. Meanwhile, only 5% said personnel reshuffling season caused the most stress. So the results suggest that people may view economic downturns and artificial intelligence as somewhat distant or abstract threats, but seeing coworkers suddenly disappear from the office makes the fear feel personal and unavoidable. And beyond the stats, this growing uncertainty is something many young people say they're feeling personally in their everyday lives. So, Fabio, do you personally feel job insecurity these days, or anxious about? job?
Yes, I guess to some extent. You see, I'm a freelancer, so to a certain level, obviously insecurity is always part of my life. But that being said, with how quickly technology is increasingly being used to replace certain types of human labor, or as we heard in the interview, used as an excuse, I feel like in my own industry, that doesn't really happen that much. So to some extent, I feel like my situation might be better to some other friends that work in corporate. Because when you really think about it this way, for freelancers, we need to constantly work on our portfolio and on the way we promote our work, and jobs are a constant flow. So sometimes they come, sometimes they might not. But when you switch companies, for example, you have to go through this tedious process of preparing documents, doing a set of interviews, and having a whole preparation that takes a lot of time and effort. So being just laid off and having to change companies seems like a very tough decision. And so in my case, not having that type of anxiety really brings a sense of security that other people might not have.
Right, well said. So what about you, Moonju?
Pretty much similar, freelancers, they are the ones who has to be chosen from the other people, and those kind of opportunities are, I think, less frequently offered. But also, I think, as Fabio just mentioned, that those with traditional corporate workers, they are also experiencing similar, but they're just different types of anxiety. So I think it just lays around our lives, daily routine lives of like the anxiety and stuff, yeah.
Right. So Fabio, you're someone I would say is doing quite well. So what, I guess, efforts are needed to survive in this new job environment?
I think it's all about strategy. And as we are seeing and what we heard from the interview today too, things are becoming much more diverse. Instead of having just a set path in every industry, we have a lot of different options. So my biggest recommendation is that just as happened with the Industrial Revolution, sometimes we have to adapt to how technology is influencing the way we live. So in that aspect, for example, we have regular jobs like being an artist or working as a language professional, sometimes even a chef. What really matters here is doing a task that is not necessarily repetitive or that can be automated. So when you do a task that has a lot of value because of the humanity behind it and the purpose that comes with it, it's very hard to substitute it with technology. So for example, let's talk about the language expert industry. So if we're talking about translators and interpreters, of course AI does a great job at translating and give you a lot of insights when it comes to language. However, a professional sometimes is needed, a person is needed when it comes to communication, empathy, being able to have a cultural understanding and portray that in different wordings, in different types of expressions. When you have those type of situations, you cannot replace a human with AI, for example.
Right.
And I think that instead of fighting against technology for the same type of industry or the same type of task, people should focus on positions where they cannot be substituted at all, where human value is really needed.
Right, so it's kind of like what our professor said. To the answer to the first question, he mentioned that there's a data and there's also the human side, just like this, with any job, the human side is also irreplaceable as well.
I mean, looking at the conversation we had today and even the interview we just had, I don't think AI can replace that. I think the human value of having a personal opinion on it or giving insights about real experiences is not something that technology can do. So, for example, in this type of case, that task or that interview cannot easily be replaced.
Right, well said. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, also I think society safety net is also essential in this rapidly changing era. Polarization is deepening and many young people are being left behind. So society must provide the necessary education and support to help them successfully integrate into this rapidly changing society.
Right, so the nature of work has always evolved, but the pace of change today feels faster than ever. And as technology reshapes industries and economic uncertainty lingers, adapting to change may become one of the most valuable skills workers can have. And the challenge will be ensuring that opportunity keeps pace with innovation. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation. But News Show will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time with more stories and discussions. A big thanks to Fabio.
Well, my best wishes to all the workers all around the world.
Right, and also Moonju.
Thanks for having me today.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for watching. And while work may not always be fun, it's still better than finding out your badge no longer works. We are
News Generation.